everyone. My name is Brian Westley Johnson, and welcome to another edition of Soulivity Live. I want to say a special hello to all of our people around the world. So I am so excited because we have a great show lined up for you tonight. So let's get started. So where should I begin? Let's begin here. Have you ever looked up in the dictionary the definition for the word vision? It's pretty interesting. It goes something like this. It's the ability to think about or plan the future with imagination or wisdom. Pretty cool, right? No? You're not convinced yet? Okay, so if that doesn't tickle your fancy, how about this? How about I share with you some of the vision statements for some of the most successful companies around the world? How about Amazon? Amazon's vision statement goes something like this. It's to be the world's most customer-centric company. That's not bad, okay. How about Ben & Jerry? Ben & Jerry's is making the best possible ice cream in the nicest possible way. Okay, now that one sounds more like the end of a TV commercial. I mean, it's pretty good though, still good. How about Disney? Okay, Disney's is very simple. It's to make people happy. That's really good. Direct, to the point. As you probably guessed by now, tonight's show is all about vision. And more specifically, how does a vision or this imagination or mission relate to making decisions about making your life better, happier, and more productive? So to help us answer this question, I brought back to our show Paul O'Brien, a resident successful entrepreneur who created the world's first divination site, tarot.com, and now dedicates his life to supporting people in developing their passion, their purpose, their mission through his books and his nonprofit company, the Divination Foundation. So with that, why don't we bring him back to the show now? So let me get him online. And there he is. How you doing, Paul?
I'm doing great, Brian. How about yourself?
I'm doing great, doing great. Well, I'm glad you're back on the show. I can't wait to get into tonight's discussion about vision. Don't forget, everyone, we love questions. So don't be shy. Just post a question directly to this live stream, and we'll get to as many of them as we can throughout and at the end of the show. So let's get this party started, man. I guess the best place to begin, Paul, I was thinking about this, is maybe we ought to start from the beginning, and that is, for you, what does it mean exactly just to have a vision?
Well, a vision is like a dream.
Okay.
It's basically a visualization of something that your heart desires. So to have a vision really depends upon the ability to use your imagination and to know who you are and what your heart desires.
Mm.
So once you have that, you can come up with a vision. And that's a good place to start. But a lot of people, have vision boards for this or for that are only loosely connected with who they are, or what they're naturally good at, or even what they're particularly interested in, because they get distracted by the byproducts. The old expression, be, do, have.
Right.
Okay,
right.
So people, it's easy to cling to fantasies about having something. Having the perfect house, or having the perfect car, or having a great relationship, and then doing something, and as a result of that, hopefully succeeding in becoming the thing that you imagined.
Gotcha.
And in all of the personal growth trainings, they teach that the right approach is exactly the opposite. It's to be who you are, and do the thing that naturally appeals to you, and you will end up having what it is that that belongs to that. So in other words, if you want to be a professional tennis player,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people, the first thing they'll do is they'll go out and buy a $200 pair of tennis shoes, in the perfect tennis outfit, and a really expensive racket.
Right.
And then they'll, take lessons or whatever, and hopefully they'll become a tennis player.
Right.
Whereas the real tennis greats basically didn't really care what they wore. They just went out. They just wanted to play.
Right.
So that's the vision. The vision precedes everything in terms of manifesting something, but it needs to be anchored in who you really are.
And I guess this next question is more, I would say, obvious, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I want to make sure, because this is a very important step, right? From kind of discovering your purpose, then kind of turning that into a vision, and then manifesting your life from that. Why is it important for us to create it? To actually create a tangible vision for ourselves? Why is that important?
Well, it's only important to the extent that you're inspired to create something.
Gotcha.
Or to make a difference in the world. But you can do that in any number of ways.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be grandiose.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people get tripped up because they don't think that their vision is big enough.
Right.
Everybody's competing, and maybe what they're secretly doing is doing the have, do, be thing, and what they want to have is acknowledgement and attention and credit and all the wonderful things that come as a result of manifesting something. So I think having a vision is important to the extent that you want to create something bigger than yourself, but I'm not sure that everybody is naturally that gifted at being a visionary.
Okay.
I tend to take a kind of a Buddhist approach to the way things work.
Right.
And I don't really care about the religions or the is or the isms, but I think Buddhist psychology and their metaphysics is pretty interesting because basically they have the law of karma and the whole idea in reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the belief in reincarnation because it allows my mind a way to accept things that in life that don't seem fair or that don't necessarily make sense.
Right.
And so, for instance, according to that view, there are some souls are older than other souls.
Mm-hmm.
People have different capacities in a given lifetime, and they have different challenges. And these are the results of choices that they made in the past or how much experience that they've had.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the Tibetan form of Buddhism, they believe everybody's been reincarnated thousands of times.
Gotcha.
It's not, and so it takes a really long time to learn lessons that cultivate intelligence and skill and merit in order to accomplish anything really big. And it's kind of, I think people, get all wound up around their ego and around their desire to be somebody special.
Right.
So they feel compelled to have some big vision, and then they don't feel good enough when they don't succeed at that, or it becomes kind of like a way of feeling bad.
As I'm thinking about what you're saying, I'm thinking that, again, life is a process, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that your vision is a moment in time where you'll be growing from stage to stage to stage to stage. So your vision that when you're 21 may not be the same vision that you have when you're 51 or 61
right.
or 31, right? So it's this evolutionary kind of process.
I think a lot of people aren't even really allowed to have a vision because they're in reaction to all this pressure that was brought upon them by the way they were parented or the way they were taught. All of these expectations and all of these thou shalt nots all the limitations that were imposed on them, it's all they can do. I mean, basically, a lot of people have their ability, their self-knowledge is inhibited and retarded by some pretty seriously repressive program that goes along with the way they were parented or the culture that they grew up in or the religion that they grew up in. And then they feel compelled, they think I should have a vision. And I think vision is more of an organic thing that comes, that tends to spring forth when it's been given an opening and when a person's had permission to try things and to discover who they are without having to conform to all of these pressures that are put on them to be one way or the other, to be a lawyer like their dad, or to be or to make a lot of money when they are more inclined towards art. And a lot of times people don't even have the opportunity to experiment and to try things. I really regret the way that we educate our children and the way that we encourage 18-year-olds to go to college and choose a major and basically go deeply into debt for the sake of some career vision that they have, when they don't even have, their brain isn't even fully developed.
Right. They don't know what they want. They're not, a lot of times they're not even ready for, to make, you go to college and it's, okay, I've got to study this one thing and the rest of my life will be built off this subject. And there's no chance for them to explore, right?
Right, exactly. So I think that's where a vision, if you're going to have a vision, it should come from some passion or something that you're very excited about or fascinated by in the first place. And how do you know what that is if you haven't had a chance to try things without a lot of adult supervision?
Right. We were talking, before the show about, being a leader and a follower and that kind of thing. And I think that discussion is important for this discussion as a visionary, because, I think a lot of times people think, oh, well, the pinnacle is when I'm a leader. And you had some thoughts around leading and following, and I'd love for you to share that.
Well, I think there's a lot of correlation between being a visionary and being a leader. A leader has a vision, and a leader, recruits people and helps to draw people towards the realization of a collective vision, or a corporate vision, or an organizational vision, or what have you. And it's very trendy now. Everybody wants to be a leader. So there's all of these leadership trainings. Everybody is going to these leadership trainings, and I have, I used to say leaders are born, not made. And I was kind of tongue in cheek about it because that's not entirely true. But I don't think that you're qualified to be a good leader if you've never been a good follower. And I remember my nephew told me, he goes, I don't want to be I want to be a leader. And he was taking these leadership training. He says, I'm tired of following. I've been following my whole life. Well, I know him very well. And I said, the question is, have you been a good follower or have you been a begrudging follower?
Right.
Now, in my own personal case, not to blow my own horn too much, I was a good follower. I was a number 2 for like 15 years. I was like I was the hired gun marketing guy for startups for 15 years. Right. Never had any equity, always was the number 2. And I just did my best to learn everything I could and to learn the insides of the business because I was interested in it. And I was fascinated in it. It was the software business in the 1970s. So I did the number 2 thing for a long time and mastered some skills that I later leveraged when I became a leader. And that helped me as a bootstrap entrepreneur. So I think it's very important to make sure that you've learned how to be a good follower before you take the leadership mantle upon yourself. That same thing, one example is like a teacher and a student. You know, it's like you can't be a great teacher if you have a learning disability. You can't be a great teacher if you haven't been a good student.
Mm-hmm.
I can't prove that, but I firmly believe that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, you know, part of the problem is people don't know who they are, but they think that they need to be a leader, and they think they need to be to have a grand vision. And it's because they want to be important. They want acknowledgement. They want love. They want appreciation. They want approval.
Right.
These are natural things for people to want. They want
Right.
acceptance. They want attention.
Right.
These are the five A's of love: attention, acceptance, affection, appreciation, and allowing. And that's kind of the freedom aspect.
Gotcha.
These are by David Rico, who's an author, friend of mine. Everybody wants love. And so they think they're going to get love if they get more of all of that stuff. And that's true, but you don't have to, it's not a competition. So, you know, you want it, it's got to like fit. And if it doesn't fit, you're never going to get enough because it's not satisfying, because it's not congruent.
Gotcha.
You know, if you get attention and for, you know, telling lies and faking people out, it's not going to be soul satisfying, and you're always going to be fighting the resistance that you get from the people that see through that. Our president is a great example of that.
Wow. You know, as you were talking too, I'm thinking, you know, being a follower doesn't mean that you don't gain anything, right? You're gaining skills, you're learning, you're actually perfecting the craft of being a leader at some future point, right?
Right. You know, I have a great expression about that. I once turned over management of a business that I started as a bootstrap entrepreneur, and I turned it over to a management team of these three people. One was an engineer, one was a engineering background, the other one was marketing, the other one was finance. They all had MBAs. And they basically, I had a company that was debt-free, that was making a profit, and within 6 months, it was $500,000 in debt with them running it. And I came up with the expression, an MBA, often wrong, but never in doubt. You know, these MBA programs are churning out leaders that don't really have any real world experience.
Right.
Now, in contrast to that, I was a college dropout, as was Bill Gates, by the way, and
right.
Steve Jobs, but I'm not in their league by any means, but I was a college dropout, and I got my first job in the software industry as a secretary because I could type. And I got paid $660 a month. And that's how I got started in the software industry. And I got that job, and I tried to get that job for 6 months before I finally got it.
Wow.
And it's because I was fascinated by software. Now, this was in the mid-'70s, before Apple even existed. I was just fascinated by the phenomenon of it, and I wanted to learn everything about it. Okay, so I was like the secretary to the director of computing at this nonprofit.
Oh, wow.
Luckily for me, he allowed me to take on as much responsibility as I proved I could handle. You know, and within a few months, I was not only taking his calls for him, I was handling the calls, and I was making I was making some sales, and I was basically helping him. And then he would take me to trade shows and help me learn everything. So I learned being a secretary, that's like a great vantage point.
Right. You get to see everything, right?
You know, and I knew women when I was, I'm just using that as an example. I don't know any men who were secretaries other than me, but I knew women who refused to learn how to type because they didn't want to be a secretary. And I thought, wow, I'm so glad I learned how to type. So that's just an example of being a follower has this opportunity to learn so much from a mentor or a leader.
Right.
So, a mentorship is a kind of leader that's very valuable to follow.
Wow. So don't discount that, people. If, wherever you are, learn. I mean, that's the moral right now. soak up as much information about like that's attached to the vision, right? I mean, because that's what we're talking about. I mean, as you create your vision, it doesn't need to be big, right? I mean, like I read Disney's earlier. Disney's vision statement is to make people happy. That's it. So everything wraps around that vision. So, Paul, what's the connector? How does a person who has this vision for their life connect that to the decisions that they want to make on a regular basis? What's that connection? What's that kind of process look like?
Well, you're talking about the process from having a vision, holding a vision, and then moving it into manifestation. In other words, it's a creative process. So this is all about creative power and about tapping into your own creative power. And if you have a vision that's congruent with who you are, and by that I mean a vision that inspires you because it fascinates you, or because it's about something that fascinates you, it doesn't have to be a grand vision that has a big end game.
Right.
You're liable to reinvent yourself several times along the way.
Right.
But it could be a modest vision. Like when I started out in software, I didn't have a vision of becoming an entrepreneur or, making a lot of money. I had a vision of making a living doing something that I found interesting. And I had a vision of learning something that I felt was going to be a valuable skill based on my intuitive hunch that this was what the future was going to be about.
Right.
So I had a very modest vision, and then the vision got larger as my capacity got greater, and as I had more of an overview of the whole arena that I was interested in. But it all started with a natural fascination that I had. I wanted to learn about software, and that inspired me to go that way. And so then, the really crux of the matter is what I wrote about in my book, Great Decisions, Perfect Timing. Mm-hmm. It has to do with making good decisions along the way.
Okay.
And I have this type of decision that I specialize in writing about, which I call visionary decisions.
Gotcha.
It has to do with vision. And it leverages the vision that you have. Visionary decisions are ones that can have life-changing ramifications. Mm-hmm. These are big decisions. We don't have that many of them in life. Some of them, probably the first one that we ever have enough autonomy to make is, where should I go to college? If you have that option.
Right.
So choosing a school, or getting married, or having children, right, or changing careers,
right,
going after a certain educational pathway,
mm-hmm,
or trying out a certain cause or whatever. And so we have to make decisions that help bring our vision to life. Decision making is the most powerful skill. It's the executive skill. It's the royal skill. And if you think about it this way, that you are the CEO of your life, and that you're an entrepreneur, even if you're working for a huge corporation, you're actually working for yourself.
Yeah.
Even though you may be accepting the contextual limitations or what have you, you can always quit.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of freedom in this society. We're not indentured anymore. So we're the only species that can visualize, envision different possible outcomes from different choices we might make.
Wow.
And you'd think we would be really good at it. But we're terrible. We suck at decision making because we're either too emotional and vulnerable to magical thinking, etc., right, or we're just too impulsive. And if we're emotional, we're impulsive, or else we're too overly analytical, and we tend to procrastinate. So we're not really very good at decision making, and that's why I wanted to write this book about called Great Decisions, Perfect Timing, to help people make strategic decisions,
right,
for their own lives,
right,
and that's focused on developing who they are and creating greater possibilities for themselves.
Wow. You ready for a question?
Sure.
All right. This one's from Millicent. Hi, Millicent. How are you? Welcome to the show. She wants to know, how can a person identify a talent or passion that can be that can be monetized or turned into a business?
I think just about any passion or fascination can be turned into a business somehow, or monetized somehow, or maybe it's going to lead you towards a bigger game that you can play with somebody else. Like, for instance, I think if you have, a passion or an interest like that, probably the smartest thing to do is to apprentice yourself to somebody who's already working and operating in that area and running some kind of enterprise or some kind of business or what have you, whether it's a startup or not. You're going to learn so much. I mean, I like to say to people, people have great ideas, and people approach me with ideas because they think that maybe I'll invest in their idea, or, or maybe I can mentor them along. And I always say the same thing. I say, an idea is only worth so much. If you have like the greatest idea, you think it's a sure thing. And let's say that you can bring to bear some practical skills. Maybe you've got a marketing talent, or maybe you've got a product development talent, or maybe you've got a general or financial management talent. So you've got some skills too. And you've got this killer idea, can't lose. The one thing you don't have is you need resources. You need resources in the form of maybe a couple of partners, because if you're not the engineering person, then you need one. Or if you're not the marketing type, you need one of those. So you're going to have to partner up with some people. And so you got to get some financial resources in order to do that. So you go looking for financial resources. And let's say you find somebody who says, oh, you go on Shark Tank, and they go, that's a great idea. And so then, but it's not worth what you think it's worth. And this is, of course, they say this on Shark Tank all the time.
Right.
But the reason is, and this is what I tell people. I used to ask people, in fact, somebody asked me when I was 25 years old, this guy who was a 42-year-old entrepreneur, very successful, he said, let's say you had the greatest idea and you had some skills to go along with it, and all you needed was the money to get this thing off the runway towards profitability. What percentage of the company would you want? And I said, oh, that's easy. At least 51%. My idea.
Right.
And he goes, wrong. He said a good idea is worth between 15 and 25%, depending on how much of a marketing presence you can bring to it. Maybe you're a celebrity or something like that, and it's worth more. So he says, if you can get 49%, take it. That's a great deal.
Wow.
Because the people that are putting up the money, they're the only people that are taking a risk.
Right.
I said, and they're taking a real risk, a substantial risk. I said, no, that's not true. I'm taking a risk too. I'm investing my own time.
Right.
I could be doing something else. And he says, that's not an accurate way of looking at it, because you're going to be learning something about something that you're already excited about. Mm-hmm. You're going to gain so much knowledge from doing this that even if it fails, you're going to come out ahead.
Right.
And you're also probably going to be drawing a salary from this funding that you're getting.
Right.
So at least you're not going to be doing it for free. So I always took that to heart. And people bring me ideas, and everybody thinks their ideas are great and that their ideas are worth a lot. And unless you can execute it, and unless you can get it off the runway, right, it's really, ideas aren't really worth that much. Like an author of a book will get a 10% royalty.
Right.
That's a kind of a great example. Why is that? I mean, when I was a publisher and I had the online publishing business, we did astrology and tarot card readings and things like that. People would come to me with, some new astrology program or something like that. Mm-hmm. They wanted me to publish because we had massive traffic. We were providing all of the horoscopes for AOL and for Yahoo at the time. And so I'd say, okay, so what is your vision, or what kind of deal are you looking for? They'd say 50-50. I'd say, okay, we can give you a 15% royalty. They go, no. I said 50-50. I said, that is 50-50. if the business is making a 30% profit,
Right.
that's considered outlandish. And I'm willing to give you half of that up front at no risk to you.
Right.
That's probably better than 50-50. What if we only do 25% profit? So, it just goes to show you people have a backwards idea of what things are worth.
Right. Right.
So if you have a great idea that you're passionate about, find somebody out there that's doing something similar to that or something in that area. And if you can't find somebody who's doing that and giving it a run or having some measure of success, it's probably not that great an idea. Or maybe it's too far ahead of its time.
Right. And then you build on that, you learn, you research, maybe you take small steps like along the way, to kind of build this thing.
Right. So that's like I was saying, I was a secretary and I started to do the marketing functions for my boss. I started to help him with the marketing functions. And then after that, I did that for a couple of years. I sort of promoted myself as a software marketing specialist. And I moved to Portland and I, got a job that paid twice as much.
Right.
I wasn't qualified for it, but I thought, well, I can learn fast enough and maybe be effective at this. And then I kept doing the same thing. I remember when I was 48 years old, I remember saying, I've never been qualified for any job I ever got. But I was very confident in my ability to learn as long as it was an area that I was interested in.
Right.
That's really what it hinges on. So if you're passionate about something, find a place to go and be a part of an enterprise that's doing something similar. You can always leave it later and start your own thing. This is the be, do, have thing.
Right.
Go be.
Go
be. Do. Help somebody, and learn as much as you can in the process. That's the best training there is.
So Millicent, go out there and be. Learn more and more and more and more about staying grounded in what you're passionate about, and maybe you need to take time to kind of experiment with different things, or maybe it's very apparent, but that's the first step. Then start doing it, go out and be a part of, like Paul was saying, different businesses. Or maybe you want to start your own kind of blog if you're a writer, there's so many examples out there.
Right.
The money will come later. The money will definitely come later. But you have to keep doing it and mastering it and mastering it and mastering the feeling inside of, your passion and what you're really inspired to do. What would you do if money wasn't an object? What is that? And
that's
then
a really good question. That's a really good question as an exercise. Let's say you won the lottery and you bought all the toys you ever wanted and you went on all the trips that you ever dreamed about. What would you do then?
Right.
And a lot of times what people have to do, and I don't know Millicent's situation, but a lot of times, people start out by doing something that fascinates them on the side.
Right.
As kind of a moonlighting thing. Instead of saying, everybody's in such a hurry to be a success as soon as possible and to achieve more and more and more. But sometimes, you have a day job, There's hardly any actor that's ever lived that didn't have a day job. I think, I wrote in my book, everybody's got a day job. It's the part of life that you have. Even Britney Spears has got all these people managing all of her affairs and everything. But she's got to manage the managers.
Right.
She's got to make the executive decisions. That's her day job. She might rather just be writing songs and performing or whatever it is that she loves to do the most. Right. But she's got a day job, which is managing the business and paying her taxes and that kind of thing. I have a day job right now. My day job is I have to manage my investments and I have to make decisions around that.
Right.
I run a nonprofit too. I'm not counting that because I don't make any money off of that. But that's, everybody has a day job, and that's the part of life that you look to in order to make a living, in order to put food on the table, in order to pay the rent. And a lot of times, when I started my business, when I became an entrepreneur, I was a marketing consultant for 3 years.
Wow.
Just to keep it together. So I had 2 jobs going at the same time. It's not easy. It's not easy to monetize your great idea. Paul, I'm thinking, and we'll wrap up now, but this all goes back to the basic premise
of be, do, have, right? Where, and again, it's a cycle. It's just not linear, right? Where you be, you do, you have something, then you start again, and you start and you learn something new and you follow that direction. And the more you do that, the more you'll be in tune with what's going on inside of you and what it really inspires you, because this is life's a journey, right? And along that journey, your vision will change, the decisions around your vision will change, and you'll get to the end, and you'll get to the end destination, which is in of itself circular, right? Where you become happier and happier and happier.
Right. We're evolving. We're going to be evolving. I look at myself, I'm going to be evolving my entire life. I'm never going to stop learning.
Man.
And that's so joyful.
Exactly, man. Paul, as always, man, thank you for sharing your wisdom. I want to remind people that you can find more about like this process in Paul's book, Great Decisions, Perfect Timing. We have information on the website, that where you can go find, you can learn more about his foundation, Divination, which is at divination.org.
Divination.com.
.com, sorry. And, again, thanks, Paul. Paul, we're coming back. You'll be back in February. Can't wait. We're doing something special with Paul for Valentine's Day. He's going to be talking to us about the romantic paradigm.
Oh, no. Something I know very little about. No, actually, it's going to be fun.
So you don't want to miss it, everyone. So, Paul, thanks again, my brother.
Thank you, man.
And to everyone out there, this is Brian Westley Johnson saying thank you for joining us tonight. And as always, want to wish you love, purpose, passion, and of course, happy living. Good night.